Representative Christy Clark is the first certified paralegal to be elected to the NC General Assembly. She is a Democrat from Mecklenburg, though not here to talk politics today, and not currently in office, though perhaps she'll run again soon. She is the mother of 5 human children and many fur children, too, and well known for her advocacy for both gun-free schools and animal rights. Her husband, Chris, is an attorney with an office in Charlotte, where she still sometimes assists with cases as a paralegal. Today, she'll help us learn how to keep up with the goings-on in the state legislature. We are very excited to have you here today, Christy.
Thank you so much. I assume that my presentation will come up here in just a second, but thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. But while we're waiting for that to happen, I will say, as a legislator and a paralegal serving in the General Assembly, a lot of times constituents would contact me for legal advice. And I always had to make sure that I said, I'm not a lawyer, I can't give you legal advice, so please don't take this as legal advice, and please consult an attorney and not me for this issue. And so even the UPL extends even when you're serving in elected office as well. Hang on. I do not know if I'm supposed to share my screen or if that's going to happen through Christina.
What is your preference?
What's your preference? Yes.
Either way.
Okay. The functionality is set up so that you can share it.
Okay. Let me get there. Share. Excellent. Okay. Is that working?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, paralegals, for having me here to speak to you today. I am thrilled to speak with you. As most said, I was the first and only North Carolina certified paralegal to serve in the General Assembly. And I was very proud of that fact and was happy to assist paralegals as they came up with questions. If we were in the room together, I would ask you to raise your hand and say, do you know who represents you in Raleigh? And if you don't know, don't get embarrassed, because most people don't know. And most people also are confused as to who represents you in Raleigh and in DC. And so there's an easy way to find out as you're coming across issues as a paralegal, and that is to go to the General Assembly webpage and look up who represents me, and you can click on it in your address, and it will show you the US House, the NC House, and the NC Senate who represents you there. And that is a great way to get started in developing a relationship with them, as you know who they are, and even better to develop a relationship with their legislative assistant, who is really the person who's doing most of the hard work there. My LA was in just indispensable as helping with constituents, as they called. And your clients and law firm and you are constituents of these folks, and they are there to help you. And so you should never hesitate to contact them or reach out to them or ask for help from their office, because that's what they are there for. Through the General Assembly, there are bills. If anyone's from the 70s like me, you remember that fun song, I'm Just a Bill on Capitol Hill. All bills start out, all laws start out as bills. They are just ideas. And this is a flow chart that's kind of like what you would have seen when you were in 10th grade government class on how does a bill get passed into a law. And as you can see in the very first purple box up there, it says concerned citizen, group, organization, state agency, legislator, suggested legislation. So bill ideas come from all over the place, and they come from experience in, sometimes legislators bring things forward that they care about, they're passionate about. Sometimes it's things that constituents request or that need, or there's a needed thing. Lots of them are introduced by state agencies like the NCDOJ or DHHS or the DEQ to, like, there's a need to correct something in statute that has outdated or maybe needs some tweaks on it to make it more relevant to today. And when that suggestion comes up, the representative will then submit to the bill drafting department to ask them to draft the bill. And in that instance, all of the people who draft bills in North Carolina are attorneys, and they go through all the current statute and legislation that exists, and also case law, and determine if that suggestion for a bill is constitutional, which is extremely relevant. You don't want to pass or introduce a bill that's not constitutional. And they draft the bill for legislators. And from there, it gets filed with the clerk. It goes on to have its first reading on the House floor, then gets assigned a committee, and it's debated in committee. And it goes on and on through the process until it is voted on the House or Senate floor and gets passed into law. And as a paralegal, why is this relevant to you is because there will be bills that are introduced that may be relevant to you as a paralegal. We've had some changes to paralegal statute and notary law and court reporting law recently, but also they may be relevant to your clients at your law firm, relating to, from all things relating to, from family law all the way through to, you know, how water is used on Lake Norman or whatever lake is near you. All kinds of different scenarios come forward in that situation, and they are all relevant in the practice of law as from your attorney and for yourself to make sure that you are, you know, are current and know what's going on. Bills are, you can keep up with what's being passed as a bill by signing up for committee updates in the General Assembly. They will, you can get a notice every week or every day of bills that have been filed and what stage they're in, and you will know what's going on, and you can kind of search for. And that's one of the ways that I sort of became in touch with my legislators when I was a paralegal, because our law firm represented a Marine Commission, and as they were making changes to Marine Commission law, I was getting notifications about that and was able to, you know, contact our legislators and talk to them about that situation and whatever was going on. And that's something that you can do as well. And each committee has, you know, can break it out by subject matter and subscribe to a committee email and get information on what bills are coming forward. We could have the next slide, please. So at the General Assembly webpage is a really wonderful place to get information. If you are looking for a bill on that particular topic, and you can see here, I've searched for paralegal, and I had two situations where paralegals came up in bills that were introduced. Those are both House bills, as you can see by the H in front of them. I looked at those bills to see what they were, and it was actually funding for a part-time paralegal in two different departments within the state. As relevant as what it says there. And so that's something, if you work in family law, you can search for family law or workers' compensation or environmental law or real estate or anything of that ilk. You can search for bill text and it will come up, and then you can click on it there and see what the bill is about. And that's where it can get a little dodgy, because bills are written obviously by those attorneys, and sometimes it will just have a line through it and say repealed, or it will say replace text with, and it will have the new wording of what's going to be there. And it is, if you don't have the statute memorized, and I certainly don't, and I don't think anyone does, then you really have to understand what is happening and what's going on there, but also what the easiest way is to find out what the bill says. One way you can do it, of course, is taking the section number of what's in the bill and searching the general statutes to see what is actually written there. But there's actually an easier way, and we'll show you on the next slide. So bills are actually, the bill drafting department actually creates a bill digest, and it is in plain English. And so I shared this one with you because it's relevant. Criminal justice reform was a very large bill that took a lot of parties involved to revise some things for criminal justice. So if you are in criminal defense, this would be definitely relevant to you. And you can see that it's written in plain English here, and you don't have to try and search through and find out which section of statute is what and go back to the statute and look it up and try and mix it together to see what it says, you can just read through this. And they do a new bill digest for every bill as it moves from the House floor or from the committee to the House floor over to the Senate, and maybe it comes back to the House floor. And there's one every step of the way showing you here what all the different changes have gone on throughout the bill. And that's a great way to have an easy understanding of what the bill is trying to accomplish without having to go back and forth between the statute and the document. And then on the next page, there's another way that is actually my favorite way on the next slide. That is the North Carolina UNC School of Government has a web page that they maintain that is called the, let me make sure I get the name right. It's called the Legislative Reporting Service. And that site links straight from bills to their site at the UNC School of Government, where they also create a summary of bills in plain English. And if we could have the next slide, please, I'll show you what that looks like. And so you can see here, it's the same bill, and it is now a summary of the bill in plain English again, which is really helpful. And even legislators use these things. So it makes it really easy to understand what's happening as the bill is moving through the General Assembly, and it goes through a lot of steps, and it's very complex and hard to tell, but you can look on this and get a great summary of what has happened with the bill along the way. And there are actually even folks at the UNC School of Government that will answer questions. If you have questions about what the bill is trying to say or what it's trying to do, they were there to help answer questions about those things. And that could be very helpful in your practice as a paralegal. So one of the things that comes up a lot in the General Assembly is that there are issues relevant to all kinds of things, and folks will email and ask for help with them. And you really don't know, like, what is this case law, or what is the statute, or what's going on, in real life. And this site is a place where you can go to that as well to get all of that information and search by topic on things that may be emailed to you. One thing I didn't say earlier was that a lot of folks get confused about what happens at the General Assembly, the County Commission, the School Board, Congress, and they're all different levels of government, and they all have different responsibilities. And so in Congress's federal level things, like the airports and transportation and the post office, and the state is, mainly a budgeting service for the state. And there are lots of statutes around criminal and civil law that are relevant. And then county commission is local issues, and then school boards obviously school board things. And so sometimes you might have a client or have an issue that maybe it might be a federal thing, it might be a state thing, it might be a local thing. And that's something that if you don't know the answer, you can always go to your state legislator and ask them. But it's something to remember, as that each avenue of government has their own responsibilities, and a state legislator can't help with a passport or immigration issue, but the person in Congress can, the House of Representatives or senator can, and but they can't help you with something relating to a state law, which could be anything from a project at NCDOT or anything like that. And so they're going to pass you back down to the General Assembly. And then if you contact the General Assembly about something with a school board issue, we get a lot of those lawsuits around students with special needs. There's a lot of things that go on with that. Those things go to the school board, and the General Assembly can't help with those things. And so, but if you have a question about that, of whether or not it can work, you can always come to the UNC School of Government and search for it, and it will come up there as, which level of government is going to help you, and what statute, if it's a local statute or a federal one, that can help you. And this is a great place to do that and explore. And if you're a nerd like me, you can go and learn about bills on there and read up on them and get a lot of information about them. So on the next slide, I just pulled up some sample bills that came through that were actually passed into law this year. One of them was changing the age to marry. In North Carolina, we were one of the few states in the country that allowed 14-year-olds to marry. without parental consent. And so that was something that was a huge issue in the media, and you may have seen that changed this year. But that's something that is obviously under family law and something that is relevant if you're in that area. Of course, we had the criminal law with the criminal justice reform bill that I mentioned earlier that is a humongous bill that changed a lot of things relating to criminal justice reform, which was actually a wonderful bipartisan effort to push that through, and it was fantastic. And then, there's a lot of work around juveniles and clearing their records. And those things it's been something that's been in work for a long time, and that is continuing to be worked on. And they expanded that eligibility for multiple folks this year to expunge their records, which is great news for folks who are trying to get an apartment or a job. One of the things that I got contacted a lot was about landlord and tenant law. And folks who are renting and they have issues. And so you can see that there's been some minor changes to that as well. And then there's one to modify the Business Corporation Act, which is relevant if you're a person who works with LLCs and helps form and change businesses. But then, so there's a ton of bills that didn't pass, and there's a ton of bills that came up on other issues that maybe you might have been concerned about, but they didn't become a law, and that happens more often than not. Bills get introduced. I think we had about 1,200 bills introduced when I was in session, and then maybe 300 or so pass and become law, and that's pretty normal. If you look at a bill on the General Assembly webpage, a lot of times you'll see it's been filed and nothing's happened to it. That means that there wasn't any influence or advocacy wanting to get that bill, or maybe it was something that just wasn't an urgent issue at the time. That happens a lot as well. But bills generally get pushed through the General Assembly through an advocacy group like this group that you're in today to take this class, or through other organizations in social justice areas, or even agencies within the state. And those are where the most bills come from, and why bills that you see are listed here are general and large and take over a lot of topics from broad end to end, because they have been something that's been brought forward by an agency, and they just combine all the bills into one thing. So on the next slide, I'm going to share with you some of the examples of things that I experienced as a paralegal and as a legislator. As I mentioned before, the Marine Commission bill, there are Marine Commissions on Lake Norman. One was dissolved as a result of personality conflicts that happened in the world. And that was something that was relevant to our law firm because we represent the Marine Commissions on Lake Norman. And so that one was dissolved, and has since not been reformed, but has, as that being dissolved has caused issues on the lake, on that part of that lake that is impacted, because there's no one there advocating for the health of the lake. And so that was something that I was tracking. But also there's changes to like quality of water and buffer zones and things like that the Marine Commissions care about. Last year, of course, I'm sure if you were a notary, you remember that during COVID, we cannot be face-to-face with folks, and you have to be face-to-face in person and see an in-person current government ID to notarize. And how are we going to do that with COVID other than doing it through, the front door or whatever? And so notaries reached out to us and asked to have video notarization. And we worked with the Secretary of State's office to develop the temporary change to statute to make that happen, so that folks wouldn't have to expose themselves to COVID. And that was something that was a big important deal for folks, because you have to notarize all kinds of things all the time, and you need to be able to do it in person and follow statute, and that was just not possible last year. And so that was a temporary change to help folks out, and something that I was happy to advocate for, and worked closely with some paralegals and notaries to make that happen. And then we also had one on court reporting that was a change to how court reporters can take a deposition, and for folks that didn't have ID, and that comes into all kinds of scenarios of why people show up without an ID for a variety of different reasons, but they needed to have an exception to that rule. And so I worked with a senator And we got that bill passed in 2019 to help out the court reporters to make it easier for them to deal with folks who showed up without an ID for a variety of different reasons. And it made it easier for them. And that was something I was proud to help out. And they were very excited and helpful about that too. And so that's those are just 3 little sample examples of things that where the world of a paralegal and a legislator and a notary all came together to be relevant for that to that topic. And so that's something that you can keep an eye out for and pay attention to. And if also in your daily work, if there is a situation that comes forward where there's a hitch in the law that makes it difficult to do something, or it's outdated, especially things don't get updated unless people ask for it. That's where you can be an advocate to reach out to your legislator and ask he or her to help you update that law or revise it so that it's more relevant or simpler, or whatever needs to happen, because there's a lot of bills are complex and things change over time and in the real world, but they don't always change in statute. And so that can be something that you can help advocate for in that same situation. Let's see, and then the last slide is what can you do as a paralegal? We'll sign up for committee notices, as I said before. They come, as the committees are being scheduled. Right now, there isn't a lot going on at the General Assembly, but they are redistricting and redrawing maps for where folks, who represents folks and where they live and everything. And that's kind of a big deal. It's related to the census, and it's, if you're a nerd like me, it's kind of fascinating also. But secondly, build a relationship with your legislator and their legislative assistant. That's what they're there for. And so you should never worry about having to contact them when it's not important or they're too busy, because that's what they're there for. And that's why you should reach out to them anytime that you have an issue come up, or you have a question, or a client has a question, or anything. That's their job to help you. And I was always happy to help, and I know my LA was too. And I know that other LAs and the ones who are still there are happy to help that as well. And then if you care about an issue, a particular cause, join in a group like this one, or another advocacy group that wants to change the laws around things, and volunteer and get involved and write to your legislators and at the General Assembly and even Congress about the issues, and help to change the laws and bring them up to date or make them more effective for folks that in the real world, because it is in Raleigh is far away. It seems like it's far away from the rest of the world, and things go on there that don't always connect with what's happening in the real world. And we need people like you to reach out and share that information and make sure that what's happening up there is relevant to everyday work. And that's where you can come in. I did not leave a last slide for my contact information or questions, but I'm happy to take any questions that you have about the General Assembly, about how laws are passed, about what you can do there. And also I'll put my contact information in the chat box so you can reach out to me if you have any other questions about anything else relating to the General Assembly.
Representative Clark, thank you so much for being with us today. It's been a long time now, but I remember talking to you about how the attorneys in the General Assembly, they did not have to take CLE every year, but you did, and that you were trying to make a little bit of progress on that. Did you have any luck?
I did, yes. I actually reached out to Joy, who you just heard from, because if you are an elected official in the General Assembly, you are exempt from attending CLEs. And I learned that while I was there. And then I said, I wonder if that's going to work out for me too. And so I reached out to Joy and the board, and they had a meeting and agreed to change the rules around paralegals in the General Assembly, since I was the first one, and got them to agree that yes, if you're a paralegal serving in the General Assembly, you do not have to take a CPE after that while you're serving. And so that was something I was happy to do. And I hope that other paralegals will serve as well and get to benefit from that as well.
I've always been curious, because in my past life, I was a journalist and, often would encourage people to comment during public comment periods and stuff like that. So I've heard rumors and I've always been curious, does it matter to public officials how people contact them? Like, does a form letter trump another letter or vice versa? Or does it matter? Is it all counted?
It is all counted, but a form letter usually gets kind of like, you can go onto a website. Let's say you care about, how one we get a lot in the General Assembly, or I got a lot, was about how animals are chained up in backyards. And it's a form letter that was generic and it was sent. You can fill it out and send it in, and it will be the exact same letter from everyone. And so those kind of, they get counted by number, but they aren't actually all read. You read the first one, they all say the same thing. So I always tell folks, if there's an issue you care about, write a custom letter, modify it to be personal to you and your experience. And those always, come to the top of the pile. But you can also call, like my legislative assistant would field calls from folks all the time, and she would call them back. And if it wasn't something that she could help with, she would pass them to me, and I would help with them as well. And that's what they're there for, and that's what you should do too. That's talk to your legislator and tell them how you feel about stuff. It's important.
I know in I call it the before times, the before pandemic times, a lot of advocacy groups from Charlotte would like carpool up to Raleigh and have like I forget what they call it, like just a day where they would, kind of hang out in the lobby and go and visit their representatives and stuff like that. And I think people forget that that's okay. Like you can just go up to Raleigh and visit with your representative any old time. And I was just wondering, how, from your perspective, what's that like? Do you feel bombarded? Do you welcome that kind of stuff?
Well, that was my favorite part of being a legislator, was having folks come visit. And I think that's the true for most folks as well. Even people who were on the opposite side of something and I might not agree with them. I loved having them come and visit and talk to them and hear their perspective on things. And sometimes, I got information that I didn't have before. But yes, the General Assembly is the people's house. It belongs to the citizens of North Carolina, and you should feel free to go there anytime. You can make an appointment or not. Usually legislators are there Tuesday through Thursday, and that's the best time to try and come and see them. But yes, it is. It belongs to all of us in the state, and you should feel free to visit them anytime.
I do have a question. Hello, Representative
Hi.
Clark. How are you? I'm Christina. Jessica had a question about House Bill 776, the Remote Online Notarization Act. I have the same question.
Yes.
If I look online, I show it's filed. I don't really know what that means.
Yep. I'm going to pull it up on my end so I can just make sure that I have the right one.
Yes.
Because I'm doing exactly what I just told y'all to do, which is look up by the bill number. It was House Bill 777.
Yeah, 776 for the remote online notarization. And we had Bill Toole from the Secretary of State speak at the last event, and he brought up potentially that maybe the notaries might have to have an additional certification, and I don't know if that stayed in the bill or if that even affected it, or I have reached out to him, but I have not heard back. So
yeah,
he's usually
let me see. Yeah, so this is a great bill to talk about. And what has happened with the bill is, let me go back to the beginning. It was filed in May. It went to committee. There was a committee substitute. It went to the House floor. It passed 107-1. I don't know who that one was, but that's curious to me. And then it went to the Senate. They made some changes. And then what happens if a bill starts in the House, it goes to the Senate, they make changes, it comes back, and it goes to a conference committee. And it looks like they appointed a conference committee on September 23rd. And that is the last we have seen of that bill. And that probably means that that bill is not going to pass. It may come back up later. But generally, if a bill gets stuck in conference committee for that long period of a time, that probably means it's seen its last day in the General Assembly. That could change. And if this is, I have not read the bill, but if this is a bill that is relevant to notaries and you want it to go forward, now is the time to contact your legislator and ask them to get that bill to move forward. And if there was an additional education or certification requirement for notaries. Good grief. I hope not. That would be something we could, talk about with them as well and ask them to not do that or to do it if depending on what needs to happen.
Yeah,
but,
I don't think it was very popular. So
yeah, whichever way, whichever way folks
popular.
wanted to go, to ask for that, because it's having been stalled for about a month. That usually means that it's stuck there forever. And so a great thing to do would be to write to them and ask them to get that bill moving again. That is something that happens a lot. We get emails from folks saying, please help me get this bill moving forward. It seems to have languished in committee somewhere. Now they are busy working on the redistricting right now, and that is taking up a lot of time. And so that may be why it's on hold, but let's see, the person, so Destin Hall is the chair who is in the conference committee. He may not be your particular legislator, but you can still reach out to him. And Warren Daniel is the senator. And again, if he doesn't represent you, it doesn't matter. You can still reach out and ask for them to push that bill out of committee.
Thank you.
And when you're on the General Assembly's website and you start researching these bills, you'll start to notice that they're all the stuff is kind of linked together. You can, find old versions of the bill and compare the text. You can find, who's the principal, who introduced the bill, who's a co-sponsor, and that co-sponsors can change over time and things like that. Yep. The General Assembly website is really, really very helpful. I encourage everybody to spend some time on it. And even, I can't think of at the top of my head what situation this might be, but there could be a situation where you're involved in some deep legal research and you may need to look at, previous versions of the bill to get some sense of, we hear about legislating from the bench and things like that, but sometimes the judge wants to know, what was going on as best as you can tell, what was going on in the General Assembly's mind as they were good luck, right? But
yeah, good luck. But you can also, it's not just current bills either. You can go back in time and look at previous sessions and see how subject matter has changed over time, which is kind of fascinating. For my own personal self, I was an advocate in gun law reform, and so I would like to sometimes go back and look to see how the laws have changed over time, because it's very confusing, and that happens a lot in different areas of law. Things have changed so much over time that it kind of gets lost in the public eye of what actually is the law now and what it was. And that's a great way that you can go back and look at them. Sometimes, so there's a tricky thing that comes up, and I'm glad you brought that up about going back to look at bills. Is one thing that does happen in the General Assembly is there's a crossover day, and that's the day that bills have to cross the House from the Senate and vice versa. And if a bill doesn't move by that time, it can no longer go forward. And so that crossover day is listed on every calendar. And so you know that if a bill has not moved out of committee and that day has passed, that bill is done for. But sometimes bills do make crossover day, and they go from the House to the Senate, for example, and then they get in the Senate and it will sit there as this notary bill has been sitting, and an issue will arise, and we need to change legislation. And this is a little bit of a behind the scenes thing that happens. That bill will be wiped clean of what it current text says, and a committee substitute will be made, and it will be a whole new bill with a whole new subject matter, keeping the same name. Maybe the title will change, it should change, but the whole new subject matter will be in there. And so that can be tricky when you're looking at a bill and how it's evolved over time. You might see it as one thing in the beginning when it was filed, and then as you continue through and you see a committee substitute, always be sure and check that. Make sure it's still the same subject matter, because that does happen. And it happened a lot last year during COVID as different situations were arising, and we needed to pass legislation to fund things or change different things. And so bills that maybe got passed on some subject that maybe whatever was in that bill that got wiped away got added to some other bill. So it was eventually heard in something else, but we needed that space on that bill that passed crossover to do something relevant to a change that came up last minute. And that happens fairly often, but it is confusing when you see the bill number and you go look it up, like maybe it's in the media and you'll see the first version and it'll, have something totally unrelated to what you think it is. It's because it's been a committee substitute. And So that is something good to keep your eye out for as well.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit. I'm not sure if you're aware, actually. There's a group who is pushing for limited licensing for paralegals in certain situations. And of course, they have to go through the North Carolina bar and the judicial branch. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, how, the judicial branch and the North Carolina General Assembly work together to, basically create the rules that govern our jobs. But before you answer, I just want to say I was hoping we would be photobombed by one of your pets, and it has happened. And he's so cute. He's back there on the steps.
There she is. Yes, that's her. Like, she likes to sleep on the stairs. That's Ashley, by the way.
Hi, Ashley.
Yes, and that was when I was referring to agencies that come in together to change statute. That's one of the things that happens. The DOJ, maybe the court system, and the North Carolina Bar, North Carolina Paralegal Bar all work together to figure out like what the change should be. And lots of times those things are done behind the scenes before the bill is even filed. And they, especially in the DOJ, they will come forward and have bill text recommendations after all these meetings have taken place. And sometimes they get presented to the General Assembly and the members, and we go, hold on, I'm not so sure about that. And we question it and maybe modify it a little and make it more, especially if it were someone like me who had been a notary and a paralegal, I would very much go through it with a fine tooth comb to make sure everything was what I thought it should be. And I would reach out to other folks who were paralegals and ask, like, what do you think of this? And is this what we should really be doing? Because sometimes, as state agencies are, they see the high level 20,000 foot view of things, and it's not always consistent with what's happening in the real world. And that actually happened to us in the change to, there's going to be a change to mandatory reporting for child abuse cases. That was a bill that was presented by the DOJ, and there was some language in it that was not specific enough. And so those of us on the Judiciary Committee, which is what a committee I was on, and it's mainly legal professionals, lawyers and paralegals, judges, we kind of questioned the language, and we worked with the DOJ to change the language. And that happens a lot. Looking to see.
Christy, it looks like we have a couple questions. Do you see those? I'm sorry, Christina. I'm sorry. I am tired.
I know y'all are. It's been a long day. The end of
one was related, again, like a follow-up question to House Bill 776 related to having a presence, notarization of individuals outside of the country or state for business matters relevant to North Carolina.
Oh, interesting.
So she says, I believe that has been removed from the bill. So, but can you recommend effective ways to help advocate for this? I think you answered that.
Yeah.
You answered that already. So sorry about that. The next question is, what in your background led to your decision to run for office?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I was very involved with gun law reform. And so that was kind of an area that is special to my heart. I got involved after the Sandy Hook shooting. And as mentioned, I'm a mom of 5, and my youngest was in 1st grade at the time. And so that became an issue for me that I was very passionate about. And spent a lot of time with the General Assembly, getting to know the legislators and seeing what went on there. And it planted a seed and kind of sparked my interest in wanting to serve. And so when it came time to have someone run for office in 2018, I jumped in with both feet. I'd never run for office before. I didn't really know what I was getting into, but I enjoyed it very much. And, it was great. And I will say, something I say to everybody is that if you, let me say it, figure out the right way to say this. Never think that you're not qualified to run for office is what I want to say. There are folks from all walks of life in the General Assembly, from farmers, pharmacists, nurses, teachers, paralegals, lawyers, judges, you name it, they're there. And that means that you too can be there too. So if there is something that you're passionate about and you want to make a change by jumping into public service, go for it. Don't hold back, just do it. And that is something I believe wholeheartedly, no matter which side of the aisle you're on or what you believe or whatever, more people need to run for office and get involved. And everyone's qualified. And so don't ever think that you're not, because you are.
It could be argued, don't you think, that we need a lot more non-attorneys in the General Assembly, because, we all work with attorneys. They're literally trained to argue with each other. And the people kind of need them not to argue sometimes when we need some stuff done. So I wouldn't, if that's something that's, on your mind and in your heart, definitely, Representative Clark, would you be open to some paralegals being in touch?
Sure, absolutely. I put my email in the chat box. Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk to anybody about what it's like, what it takes. It takes a lot. The first thing you need to do if you want to run for office is ask your family if it's okay with them, because it takes up your whole life. And especially if you're doing something, as big as a state legislative seat, that's the first thing to do is make sure that they're on board, because if they're not on board, it'll make it very hard. But if they are, go for it. Don't hold back. You are eminently qualified. There's no reason why you should ever think, oh, I'm not qualified, or I haven't done this, or I haven't done that, or I don't have this degree or that degree, whatever, just doesn't matter. Run for office.
So when I think the last time we talked, you said you were going to wait until after the redistricting had completed before you make a decision to run again. Is that still the case?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes. If you're interested in redistricting, you can follow along with Colin Campbell. He's a politics reporter in Raleigh, and he's been tweeting about all of the different things that are going on with the maps. Maps are drawn by population. There's 120 House seats, and they take the population of the state divided by 120 and figure out districts based on that. And the same thing is true for the state Senate. And then that also happens for the congressional U.S. House seats, which are divided by population. And then in the Senate, U.S. Senate, we are statewide represented right now by Senator Richard Burr and Senator Tom Tillis. So it's very interesting if you want to know about how these things happen. The county commission and all the county commissions actually, and all the counties are doing that, as well as the school board, and the city of Charlotte is also doing that. They have districts. And so these are, fascinating to see, how things change and which part you are in. If you don't know what precinct you're in, you can look up yourself on the NC voter lookup, and it will show you what precinct you're in, what state house, state Senate district you're in, and what U.S. House seat you're in. And that's a great way to start to see where you are. And then if you want to get involved with your precinct level. That's where things are happening at the local grassroots level. And they always need volunteers on both sides of the aisle, doesn't matter. And it's a great way to get involved and learn about politics and how things work during elections and things like that.
And honestly, ways to get involved include just paying attention. We've got some really good journalists in Charlotte who live tweet our city council meetings and county commission meetings. And then the journalist she mentioned is a stellar journalist up in Raleigh. Just paying attention, whether it's via social media. A lot of public meetings are held via Facebook. You can even find them sometimes, the live meetings, on YouTube. I know the city and county commission here and city council and county commission here in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. You can go back and look at their videos from many years ago, much to some of their chagrin, I'm sure. But, and I believe that there are transcripts available. I'd have to go back and look. It's been a while since I've looked that up. But, sometimes that matters. You might be dealing with a local ordinance or something along those lines and need to go back to look at, again, look at the meeting and see if you can't, get some sense of why the ordinance came about. Sometimes ordinances come and go. Is that ordinance even still on the books? There's sometimes those videos can be really helpful.
Yeah, and there's some doozies of laws still on the book in North Carolina that go back from, almost colonial time period, some of them. And so, they work really hard at the General Assembly. They have a department that goes through and tries to update them all to, current time and language and non-gendered language and, other things relating to things, civil rights issues and things that have changed over time. But there's still a lot that's slipped through the cracks. And that's another good point is whoever represents you on your town board or a city council or county commission or school board, you could also make appointments with them and talk to them about those issues as well on the local level, and send them emails. And if the day comes when we have in-person meetings again, which I hope is soon, you can sign up to speak at any of those meetings too, and talk about, if there's a change to a traffic pattern in your neighborhood that you don't like, or there's a change, a building is being built, or something is happening, with taxes or whatever. You can sign up to speak on those issues locally as well too.
Anything really, like it seems like there's always, especially when we were in person, there's always that one guy who shows up who's talking about something that nobody's thinking about, But the point is that it's your right, and you can go and you can talk to them, and their emails are available, all of you, local, county, regional, state, emails are, there's your puppy again. All the emails are available online, and I would say you're welcome to be in. Is that you're almost expected. It's kind of part of our civic duty.
Yes, it is. Just like voting, I should say. Vote, and voting matters. It's local issues come from your town board and your county commission, and even the state determines what different things happen with. People are always worried about traffic and schools. Those are the two things I always heard the most about. And the General Assembly has a great impact on how those things work and are funded or not funded, as the case may be. And that goes also down to the county commission as well. And so if you want to have a say in those things, or you have small children, or you're getting stuck in traffic a lot, or whatever, that's a great way to voice your thoughts on the issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so are you currently working as a paralegal?
As you said, I believe in the introduction, I still am an employee of my husband's law firm, and I help him with special projects, especially around clients that I already have a relationship with. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Well, thank you so much for spending your time with us today. I know you're very busy. Allie, is there anything that you would like to add? Uh-oh, you're on mute. Classic Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
If we had the bingo, I would have gotten it. Of course I would. No, I was just saying, Christy, that it's been a pleasure and an honor to have you. I think, it's definitely, for me, it's been a long time since the civics class, and you forget about that it is by the people for the people, and we have a right to speak up and to let our voices be heard, and also to represent those, us and those around us. So it's just awesome that we have our certified paralegal who represented us. So
and I'm so happy if you have an issue or whatever, you can still email me, and I can pass it on to the folks at the General Assembly to if there's something that comes up or you have a question and you'd rather ask me, feel free. I'm happy to help out and be a liaison. Yeah, I'm happy to be a liaison between the folks in Raleigh and the paralegals, or whatever your issue is.
The redistricting issue is a really, really complicated one. And so do you really believe that that'll be done around November? And I guess, how can people pay attention to that? Because that really, just tune in. That's one of those, you mentioned Colin, but are there other organizations you know of, or other ways people can tune in? Because that one's going to be really impactful.
Yeah. The one way is to follow your legislators on Twitter, because they are tweeting out links to meetings. Redistricting is kind of wrapping up this week. And so there will be public hearings next week around the state. And you can find those on the General Assembly webpage. But also, I just noticed, Representative Mary Belk, who's in Mecklenburg County, tweeted out a link to sign up to speak if you want to speak through that too. And that's a great way to get involved and go back and read through the tweets from Colin Campbell. There's another organization called All on the Line, and they, like me, advocate for nonpartisan independent redistricting committees to do redistricting instead of legislators. And so that she has been tweeting the maps out every single day and explaining what's happening. And that's a great way to learn about what's happening with redistricting. It will change who you vote for in 2022 and possibly who represents you as well. So it's a great way to learn how to do that as well.
And just for those who don't know or who aren't on Twitter, it's my personal social media poison of choice. But you do not have to have a Twitter account to actually go out and look at people's Twitter accounts unless they're locked. Mm-hmm. So your public officials should not have locked accounts. If they do, you know, let your local journalists know.
Yeah. It's technically not legal.
Yeah, if they block you, also speak up about that. But you know, you don't have to have a Twitter account. I know some people are just like anti-Twitter, and I understand, but as like a news junkie, it is kind of, you know, a good way to mainstream what's happening immediately. And I'll say that the General Assembly has a hashtag. It's hashtag NCGA on Twitter. I often post a little bit of snark on there. You know, that's old habits die hard. But and then you can also check out NCPOL, and I'm sure that the various parties have their own hashtags and Twitter accounts and whatnot. But just so you know, you can even search for hashtags on Twitter without having a Twitter account. So Twitter is an interesting beast for sure, and maybe we'll get into that more in another session. Yeah. But definitely, if you're trying to tune in, definitely check it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can follow your legislators on Facebook, on Twitter. Most of them have a newsletter that they send out weekly, which is a great way to receive information from them. You can just send them an email and ask, like, please add me to your newsletter list. And it will talk about like what bills have gone through that week and what's coming up and any local events that are taking place, or maybe where they're appearing, so that you can go and talk to them in person if they're doing that as well. And that's a great way to stay in touch with them too.
I found that most politicians are really approachable, actually, and regardless of your political affiliation, they're kind to you and nice, easy to talk to. So I would just say, have no fear. Go ahead and speak up.
Yeah, have no fear. They're like me. They're just like me. They're dads and moms and grandparents and, you know, all of that. They're just like your neighbor. They are your neighbor in some cases. And so don't hesitate to contact them and befriend them even. And especially, I can't say it enough, befriend their legislative assistant. Those are the people that answer the phones and see the emails, and they're the people who will call you first. And it's really good to have a great relationship with them. And before I was serving and I was represented by Representative Charlie Jeter, I became really good friends with his legislative assistant just because I was there all the time and talked to her, and it was nice to have that relationship. So build the relationship.
Kind of like the clerks of court.
Exactly like that.
They can be a great asset, but you gotta find that way in. So.
Yep. Make friends, get to know them, get to know their family, their dogs, whatever, you know, all that.
Well, and you never know too, because like Representative Jeter is now, I think he's the attorney for CMS, Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools. So he's still very involved and, you know, again, an approachable guy, you know, easy to talk to, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, you just never know. It's like any other networking, right? You never know where those relationships might lead.
Yep. He is the liaison for the Charlotte Mecklenburg school system to the General Assembly. Most government agencies have a person who is the government liaison to the General Assembly. And then most lobbying organizations or civic organizations also have a liaison to the General Assembly. So, you know, for example, it's not called the Charlotte Chamber anymore. It's called the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance, I believe. They have a liaison to the General Assembly who comes and visits and talks about business-related issues to the legislature. But also the city of Charlotte does, the county does, the school board, the towns all do. There's a League of Municipalities that sends somebody to talk. So every place where there's an issue that you might be concerned with or your client might be concerned with, there's somebody who's a liaison to the General Assembly who's working on that already, and you can find those too.